Greetings, friends. The operational situation at the front and the news for the 5th of May. I congratulate Christians on Easter. I wish, of course, all the best. Well, let's move on to our summary. The summary will be, unfortunately, heavy. We'll start with Kotlyarevka. We talked with you yesterday. Kupis is the Kalamansky section of the front. At the clarification, because I can neither confirm nor deny the information, there was no visual data. Well, subsequently, the Russian side still published footage closer to night. And the AFU also published footage where the blow was struck at the westernmost point in Kotlyarevka. That is, confirming that the enemy managed to completely capture the settlement. The advance on the site is 1.8 kilometers wide, to a depth of up to 900 meters. The situation looks like this. Well, here we will talk a little more in detail with you for Kislovka. We said that they are focusing on moving south along the forest belt from the football field, from the territory of the football field, where we have several forest belts, a small landing, and then try. Well, we have already specifically outlined the plan, yes. How they will try to attack the western part from the south. And this forest belt, she crossed. And the next stage is, of course, the same strip of forest that is in the gray zone. It will be pressed. Not only from the Kislovka area, but also from Kotlyarevka, in order to increase pressure on the central and western parts of Kislovka, where active hostilities continue at the intersection today, and where, so to speak, it is possible to stop the Russian troops, although they attack, including with the support of armored vehicles. In other words, they are actually making a very big emphasis, but already when advancing in the Kotlyarevka area, yes. The situation is getting a little worse on this sector of the front. Active hostilities continue. Moving on. We do not record any significant changes in the Lyman direction, the positional nature of the fighting, as well as in the Serebryansky forest, for which we have not actually spoken for more than a month. Although there are active hostilities going on here, they are positional in nature. We do not fix any significant changes in the hourly direction. So far, everything remains within the positionality. So we will not stop at this segment of the front. Let's just say that several attacks were made by Russian troops, but they were of a positional nature. And we turn to the Pokrovsky direction, where we have the main changes. I wrote to you in the morning report that the enemy is now pressing in the east, northeast, north direction from Arkhangelsk. This is the actual site. Approximately this area between Karamik and Arkhangelsk, there are two forest belts. Here, accordingly, the enemy will naturally probe the defense. Why? Viburnum. Kalinova is located similarly to Arkhangelsk in a specific way. Yes, it is squeezed between the stakes, so to speak. And it is very difficult to eat if you approach from a number of sections of Russian troops. It is very difficult to defend such a settlement, although it has its own advantage. Its location is parallel to the front line. If it rises from Arkhangelsk plus fortifications, but time will tell, so to speak. So far, we are stating attempts along to forest belts from Arkhangelsk. The main pressure, of course, is already coming from the Arkhangelsk Osheretin and the captured dachas, to the fortified area of the western Arkhangelsk, and the positional nature of the fighting. This is our northern flank, only as we say, in the direction of Novoalexandrovka. That is, for the most part, it is the activity of the Drug and the reconnaissance of the battle. Naturally, now the Russian troops need to close the ledge along the cascade of stakes, after which they will transfer forces. In order to put pressure on Novoalexandrovka, including Novoalexandrovka. We come next. Solovyev-Berdik. The enemy managed to advance to a depth of 900 meters along two forest belts, occupy just the same T-shaped intersection. There is also a small support point there. Well, they are now pressing in the direction of Novopokrovsky. Before, as you remember, they pressed Russian troops from Solovyev, made attempts, but here we stated at this stage that we managed to repel absolutely all attacks. There were a lot of attacks, And we also said it yesterday on the evening broadcast, and in the afternoon, that they are doing a lot. But they managed to repel. It means that the decision was made by the enemy command to attack as in other areas with a wide coverage, that is, not to use the forest belt adjacent to the Stavka to the south, but to try to use a wide coverage, in order to get positions for storming Novopokrovsky somewhere. Therefore, we continue active hostilities both from Solovyev and conditionally from Burdik in the direction of Novopokrovsky. And then we move on to Orlovka-Umanskaya, a thin Yasnobrodovka. After the relatively observed positivity for several weeks, the enemy has accumulated some forces in Orlovka and, accordingly, is now conducting active assault actions in the direction of Umansky. We note the enemy's advance to a depth of 108 kilometers in this sector of the front, and the transition of a partially fortified T-junction under their control. They attack both from Orlovka and from Thin, that is, it is clear that the main task is to break through to Kamansky. But in principle we predicted when we said that from Thin, they would be on Umanskaya, I said that it would be a clear cut. But just from Orlovka, they would try to Umanskaya, although and there is the southern part of Uman, south of Stavka, yes. But still they will try through Orlovka. Why? Because here, in contrast to the Thin one, there is a shorter logistical shoulder. Taking into account the activity of drones not only in Beer, but also scouts, drones by dumping. Naturally, Orlovka is a more suitable position for them to conduct assault operations in the direction of Umansky, because, well, let's say, according to the losses of equipment, a thin Yasnobrodovka, a thin Umanskaya, is significant from the Russian side. Plus, don't forget the very assault, when they used 36 pieces of equipment, and then 12 tanks were shot down and destroyed. That is, the main fist was broken, and therefore they revised their plans, well, and we observed some positionality during this period. Therefore, now they are betting on Kamansky to break through from Orlovka. Active fighting continues in this sector of the front. As for Nontailov and Pervomaysky, there is also high activity, that is, a high pace of hostilities is maintained. They are still pressing into the central part of the Nontail. Well, as for Mayday, the main attempts from the Russian side to break through just the same to the very support for which we spoke before, but not from one direction. As we then analyze the promotion and personnel from about this area, yes, approximately, yes, there were from this one. They also make attempts to get around, that is, to break through abandoned orchards somewhere. There are still small islands here, yes, and through them they are making these attempts. So far, we have not recorded any changes, including visual ones. According to Novelsky, today a number of Russian Osinters stated that the Novelsky Apu allegedly restored control in it. But in fact, they did not lose control in the Novelsky Apu. Control, as we initially talked about. But today, or rather yesterday, the footage was published, today we are analyzing it. The enemy confirms that Nevelskaya is under the control of the AFU, the defense forces. Therefore, we do not fix any changes, I repeat. What is coming from the Russian Osinters is exactly what Rybar drew for them, allegedly the capture of Novelsky. And then they somehow corrected the map without the northern farms, only Nevelskoye itself. Well, in general, in any case, this did not correspond to reality, although the fighting was fierce then. We managed to repel these attacks. Nevelskaya is like a bone in the throat of the Russian troops. Therefore, they will definitely make further attempts to improve the tactical situation, enter settlements, conduct assault operations. But so far, including taking into account the fact that there is a green light, and as you can see from the footage, quite a lot, yes. This creates obstacles for them for aerial reconnaissance, including, well, for us as well, for the AFU as a whole, for the defense forces, this creates obstacles, of course green, some difficulties. So here we will not be one-sided, there are them on both sides. Therefore, the situation remains unchanged. And against this background, of course, we see that the attacks that we have been talking about since May Day are continuing. The Russian troops want to break through to the support, and then the support will make it possible, first of all, to transfer additional forces not into the open area, but into dugouts, that is, not into pits, a single dugout. And having gained a foothold at the beam of the house, they will then be able to increase pressure on Nevelskoye, not only from the east and south, but from the north, and this is a slightly different situation. Well, this is later Nevelskaya. The capture of Nevelskaya would increase pressure on the northern part of Krasnogorskavka, which we have behind the headquarters, because there are actually open areas here and everything rests on Nevelsko. But there is still a large line of defense at the beam, but let's just say, again, if they put pressure on it from 2 directions. This is one thing, from 3 directions, this is a completely different situation. Therefore, we will see how you like to hear. We proceed further Krasnogorovka. Yesterday, we supplemented some progress with the information that we had, but I said that we were clarifying. For today, I have corrected the situation, plus or minus, which is, again, not the most accurate. Because now there are active assault actions. They went yesterday, they went the day before yesterday, they are going today. Therefore, the situation is very dynamic. We are adding a red zone on a section up to 101 km wide. To a depth of 510 meters, the situation looks like this. It has already been adjusted. It means that with regard to one of the workshops where the flank was installed yesterday, flag from the Russian side, demonstration on the frames. Under the powerful fire from the AFU, the Russian troops and infantry retreated. They retreated not to their original positions, but the first one to Vachutina Street, to the building, and the second moment. We have another street running just to the south. I don't remember its name. Well, it's not important to build this street. The most important thing is the basements, to which they retreated from this workshop. In other words, they did not gain a foothold here on the territory of this workshop, but retreated. Because forces from the Russian side are involved, not large yet, not large. Although they are not transferring forces, but let's say they were transferred to the southern part, as you remember. Then to the southeastern outskirts, to the territory of the garages of the Garage Cooperative. Here is such an advance, it will allow them to transfer additional reserves and already increase the pressure. And as you can see, the vector of attacks regularly changes from the Russian side. As we remember with you, Geologichnaya Street was pressed in the north direction, just the same at the interchange, at the ring. There were active hostilities, and then they tried, including attacking the hunting house, to move further in order to cut off the sunny area. That is, there was such a plan, it was known, from 2 directions to beat. Then we again see the attack of Krasnogorsky attack on Krasnogorovsky refractory plant. Well, as it were, they are mainly working in this direction now. We used to say that they needed Zheleznodorozhnaya Street, where they pressed in the western direction, in order to get a wider coverage, and further in the northern direction of the attack, and then to the factory, but it turned out that they did not even move further in the western direction, but already along Vachutina Street, and moved into the same building. Therefore, the vector changes regularly. It is very difficult to predict on such a piece, and with such dynamics. But still, the enemy will continue an active assault. Well, in fact, we will say that there will be a battle for the plant, for the main support. If they manage to take it, they will be able to deploy very serious forces, because after all, this is an enterprise, any factory. It allows you to deploy these forces. Therefore, there are very heavy battles. Moving on. We have said about Georgiivka that there is some activity. Today, on the 5th of May, we state the situation unchanged. Although we will add again that the Russian row, the military officers from the Russian side, a number of Russian military officers and Osinters, they draw today a promotion further to the Georgiivka Club. But taking into account what we had in Novelsky, and I told you, something does not correspond to reality on their part. A similar situation in Georgiivka also does not correspond to reality. There are active hostilities, assault actions on the part of the enemy, but there is no evidence that they managed to advance. And how they draw to the center, as in the case of Novelsky.